Well, it's great to have you on, Peter. Thanks for taking the time to speak with us.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate you talking with me.
I interviewed you here at WNCW years ago in July of 2009. You and Chris Stamey did a Studio B session.
That's right.
So it's been a minute.
Yeah, about.
So tell us, what is a day in the life of Peter Holsapple like these days? What are you up to?
Well, for example, I'm here in my home studio, the Hit Shed, which is behind my house. And I've been doing, since the pandemic started, I've been doing a lot of overdub sessions online for people. And it's been a lot of fun, and it's been a little bit remunerative. I've been trying to write a lot of songs, trying to figure out how to get out on the road again with the COVID situation being such a surfing marathon. Where's the wave? Where are we gonna go? So that's what I'm trying to figure out. But otherwise, being a dad and being a husband and doing the laundry.
All right. So wanting to talk about this new collection, I thought you wanted to know 1978 through 1981, rare tracks, demos, live cuts of early material from your days in the dB's, and thinking about your very beginnings in Winston-Salem, just it's really punching above its weight as far as musical output, especially from that era when it was, I don't know how people can understand how different the landscape was musically when you came up, because you had some radio, you had some television, but other than that, you didn't have a lot of outlets to discover or to have a space for your voice, for your music, and how hard that must have been coming up.
Well, that's very true. We were fortunate in Winston-Salem to have a bunch of really good radio stations. We had WTOB, we had WAIR, we had WAAA. And then we also had a thing called Deacon Light at WFDD, which is where we heard a lot of underground stuff first. And that was very cool. It was a lot of searching for stuff, I think, growing up. We saw the Beatles. Everybody saw the Beatles at that point on Ed Sullivan, and started a band because of that. And then everything else we had to kind of locate. I remember listening to what was referred to as clear channel radio back in the 60s. And we would listen to WCFL in Chicago, to a show called Ron Britton's Subterranean Circus. And he would play all sorts of weird stuff. I think that's the first place I heard the first King Crimson record, for example. So you could hear this stuff, but you had to find it. Also in Winston-Salem, we had a record store called Resnick's, where I eventually ended up working. But when I was a preteen, I would go there, and the older guys, it's always the older guys, would say, "Oh yeah, that James Taylor record, that's pretty good, but maybe you want to try this Captain Beefheart record instead. See what you think of that." And I'm going to the listing booth, and it's like, okay. Yeah. So there was a lot of that. And having a group of like-minded friends that really appreciated the music, and then also a very strong band scene in Winston-Salem from the Five Royales on down. In the 60s, we had the kiddie shows at the Carolina Theater and the Winston Theater. And you would go there on Saturday morning at 9 o'clock. Your parents would drop you off. You play bingo, win a 6-pack of tall 16-ounce Coca-Colas, see a movie, and hear a local band or two. And it took a while for me to make the connection between what I was seeing there and what I saw on Ed Sullivan. But I finally made that leap of faith in my head. And then we started playing, everybody sort of learned an instrument, and we had a lot of people that learned to play. And we had a very, very strong scene of players from, I would say these guys, a lot of them were older guys, and a bunch of them were around my age, like Mitch Easter, who was a year older than me. And he was very advanced and very good on his instrument. And we go see his bands. So it was a lot, it was hard in Winston-Salem, without a doubt. We had to do the searching for ourselves. You tell people that in an internet age that you had to like get the Schwann catalog and look up the numbers of the record there, or you couldn't find the third Velvet Underground record, but you knew it was MGMS 4617 and you just couldn't find it. So, you know, it was a lot of search and seek missions, and that was fine because we were up for it. You know, we'd go to Greensboro, go to the record stores there, see what we could come up with. That was cool.
Yeah, everything had to be tangible. All of the experience and the learning that you did, you had to find an object, you had to read liner notes. I remember a friend of mine had this funny anecdote where the first time that he went to see Doc Watson in the 1960s, and he and his friends are in the audience and they're going, Doc Watson is blind. They had no clue until they went
Yeah,
to see him live.
it's true. It's true. I mean, you know, yeah, I wonder if you value stuff more with the tangibility of it. You know, I mean, I love my records. I love collecting records. I love listening to records. I love reading liner notes. You know, you can't do all that with streaming. So it's a different value on the music, maybe. I'm not sure.
Well, it took a lot of ambition and a lot of real talent too. So you really hit on some things of the sort of pool of talent from Winston-Salem back in the day. Did you know about bands like the Five Royales, or were you aware of any of the other people in the that preceded you?
We the For me, for Winston-Salem stuff, my first understanding that there were actually people playing was probably the bands at the kiddie shows, like the Five Satans and the Teen Beats and groups like that. And some of those guys made records. You know, they made 45s. Dick Bennick, who was a local DJ and eventually became a horror movie guy called Dr. Paul Bearer. And that's a whole other thing. But he produced a bunch of records for local bands. And so that was sort of where I started realizing, oh, people are doing this around here. So I had a little band when I was in fourth grade, I guess. Dana and the Blue Jays, two guys with acoustic guitars and a guy playing a snare drum with a cymbal. And we all had to, you know, we all read out of the Golden Beatles songbook. And, you know, I'm sure we sounded like two, you know, 9-year-olds with acoustic guitars and a 10-year-old with a drum, you know, but we played and we learned. And I think that we learned how to learn songs. I learned that also a lot from being with Mitch in bands over the years. We had a band when I was in 10th grade called Rittenhouse Square, and we made a record in 1972. We went to Greensboro and recorded 6 songs. And being in a band with Mitch was really great because he is an extraordinary musician. He is incredibly natural at his craft. I don't think I've ever heard him hit a wrong note on guitar. He will take me to task for that, I'm sure.
Unknown caller.
Excuse me. And unknown caller. And
Unknown.
yeah, I got it. Unknown. So anyway, Mitch Easter, playing in a band with Mitch Easter was an incredible experience for me because he just knows how to pick apart a song. And that also shows up in his own songwriting, I think. The many parts that he comes up with that are unique and fabulous. But when you learn to do that stuff with him, you learn how to work with another player also. A lot of the stuff we did in Rittenhouse Square was like the first 3 songs, 3 of the first 4 songs we learned were Wishbone Ash songs. Okay, so dual guitar, right? So I had to raise my game to play with Mitch. And I did, I think. You know, we became different musicians and different styles, but we started with a lot of the same stuff. And that was really cool. You know, it's like playing tennis with somebody better than you. You should always try to do that and your game will improve. So we had a lot of people like that in Winston-Salem.
This experience seemed to serve you well when you went to the big city and you started knocking on doors, because I imagine that without that sort of internal drive, without that sort of confidence and expecting really nothing, because your story is like so many other North Carolina bands and artists that didn't really have a pipeline. They didn't have an industry or a real path that had been carved out that was obvious before them to get somewhere, and you got somewhere. So tell us about that.
I suppose that's true. When we went to New York, when I went to New York to join the dB's, Chris, Will, and Gene were already up there in about 1978. We had the advantage of having honed our craft a little. A lot of the stuff in New York was very DIY, and it was a lot of folks that weren't in bands before, and they just wanted to get up there and make a racket. And that was really great stuff. It was really primitive and it was really beautiful. And so it helped us become something different from that by having had some kind of process of learning the instruments and learning to write songs. I mean, I've been writing songs already by the time I got to the dB's. And so I think that set us apart in a lot of ways. I'm not sure in a good way necessarily. I mean, it certainly didn't reflect record sales eventually, but I think we made really smart records. I think we made stuff that people had to listen to carefully. I think they can still listen to these songs today on that record that you just described as having come out, and they can hear what went into the earliest part of the band, how we started out, how we presented ourselves to these record companies, and who ultimately passed on us, I guess, but records didn't. And the next thing that we did, making records for a company in England, and that was kind of cool. Blondie did it. Why not us?
Yeah, that's right. I think Hendrix had to get found to get really discovered in England too, right?
Pretty much, yeah. Or Susie Quattro or the Stray Cats. A lot of times it's just, I mean, going back to Winston-Salem, growing up in the 70s, the audiences mostly really wanted to hear like the Allman Brothers Band and Marshall Tucker Band and Skinnerd. And, I can't fault them. That's popular stuff and great music, but it was not what we were into playing. We wanted to play Mott the Hoople and the Flaming Groovies and the Move and the Kinks. So where does that leave you? You move to New York and you try to do something with it. So
I like Mott the Hoople too, and I'm trying to square your love for Mott the Hoople with what dB sounded like and what your solo records sound like. At least in presentation, Mott the Hoople was larger than life as far as what they looked like. What drew you to them? Because it doesn't sound like they're exactly in sync with your own style.
well, we were life size, not larger than life. And you have to have that so you can see the larger than life people. But you think about Mott the Hoople and you think Queen opened for them on tour, and see where Queen got and see where Mott the Hoople got. We loved Mott. All of us loved Mott. We loved the power. We loved that first album a lot. The high school band with Mitch and Chris that cut the record, we played Rock and Roll Queen live because it's just a balls to the wall rock song. My high school band at prep school did Walking with a Mountain, and that's a great song. We just, the power of the band. I mean, you can say the dB's don't really sound like Mott, but we had the energy. And, it was the energy that we brought into the early days of the band, especially, was a product of listening to all of this stuff. We loved the New York Dolls, but we didn't sound like the New York Dolls. We loved the Move. We didn't really sound like the Move either, but, we just sounded like, hopefully, some kind of amalgam of the good stuff we got to listen to from when we were kids, starting with, when we flipped on the radio in the car.
Your new collection follows your work with Chris Stamey, going back a few years, Our Back Pages, where you went back and did sort of an acoustic treatment or more of an acoustic treatment on a lot of early material. And now you've got a lot of the material that preceded your first dB's album. So what's going on here, Peter? Are you just more reflective? Is this conscious, or did it just kind of come about? Because I know, like, for example, Our Back Pages, you had recorded that a lot earlier than it finally was released. So
Yeah.
is it just sort of a time in life or a time in your career where you want to look back and actually process all of this?
Well, maybe. I mean, I think that we had done those nice acoustic recordings of the dB songs when Chris and I were cutting Here and Now a few years ago. And we just really liked the way they sounded, and we liked what they represented because we had played a lot of that stuff in our duo shows. So it was important to us to try to get something like that out for people to get to hear. As far as the heritage release, let's say, it was a situation where some of those songs had been released on a record called Ride the Wild Tom Tom that Rhino put out a few years ago, or many years ago, actually. Now, it's many years ago for almost everything. And so we thought it might be fun to do a package that really took a left turn, and especially in the case of adding these live tracks that Chris Stamey worked really, really hard to get the source material for and to do his best to make sound good. A lot of this stuff was some guy out there with a cassette in his hand, a cassette recorder in his hand, a Walkman, a recording Walkman, the high end of its time. And so he was able to find these things. And to me, that is the real significant triumph of I Thought You Wanted to Know, is because you look at the record, I was pretty much sucked at best. We were never terribly consistent. We were always a better studio band, I think. Live, we were not the strongest vocalists. I mean, that's why a band like REM succeeded, is one reason. It's because they had a fantastic singer in Michael Stipe. We didn't really have that. Chris and I were serviceable, and we made a significantly different sound when we sang together. So we wanted to show people that we really didn't suck live. And that was kind of great. Hearing these covers that we did, we really tore them up. And I remember thinking they were so much fun to do live, but I really didn't give them much thought afterward, And so finding these and processing them that Chris did for the record has been a real eye-opener for me.
Yeah, it was probably a very meticulous process to clean up the live tracks, especially, but I know that the audio quality on I Thought You Wanted to Know is a step above Ride the Wild Tom Tom. So it seems like you must have taken some time.
Chris is a very intense listener, and he is the guy to do that kind of thing with these tapes. I mean, he really took a lot of work and a lot of time to put that together, and he deserves our thanks for that. It is remarkable, isn't it, though? I mean, and even the New York rocker demos, the stuff like Nothing Is Wrong or What About That Cat, those sound so much better now too. They really are just significantly improved by modern recording processing techniques.
I want to ask you about all of the various artists that you've collaborated with, all of the different folks that you've played with over the years. I think the definition in the book of plays well with others ought to have your picture next to it, Peter, because you've done this so well for so long. So what stands out as far as moments on stage or in studio with other artists?
Well, one thing I would say is that's a great point about works well with others, and yet Game Day, my solo record, is pretty much, I played everything on it. I sang everything on it. I recorded it. I engineered it. So maybe I don't play well with others. Who knows? Significant moments. Let me think. I worked for about 26 years with Hootie and the Blowfish as their keyboard, guitar, steel guitar, mandolin guy. And I had so many great moments with those guys. That 2019 tour that we did across America and into England before COVID hit was really nice. That was a really fantastic victory lap for me, to go out there and play these shows for all these people. I mean, great REM shows, lots of marvelous REM shows. I remember one with REM at this place in Hamburg called Grosse Freiheit 36, which is on the site of the Cavern Club, or not the Cavern, excuse me, the Kaiser Keller, where the Beatles played. That's sort of the basement bar. And I remember that we were at the end of the tour, and Michael told the crew that they could drink after sound check, and the crew just let up a big whoop and was very happy about that. So, but there are all kinds of marvelous memories. Playing with the Continental Drifters, so many shows with that band were extraordinary, because I was sort of liken that to being strapped to an out of control locomotive going down a hill with no brakes and singing at the same time, a drink in one hand, a guitar in the other. Perfect. And a lot of great times with the dB's too. I've had a marvelous career doing this. I'm really proud of the things that I've gotten to do. I don't regret much of anything that I've done. I wish I'd stopped drinking earlier, maybe, than 19 years ago. But the last 19 years have been pretty great, I gotta say. And what else? I don't know. Getting to sing with a bunch of people that, again, that's that whole thing of playing tennis with people than you. Singing with Susan Cowsill for years in the Continental Drifters made me a much better vocalist. I'm just a fortunate guy. I've had a great long career, and I hope to keep going until I drop dead.
Great. You're looking great, Peter.
Thank you. You like my t-shirt?
Yeah, I do.
That's that great sign that was in Durham. I don't know much about it, but it makes a really nice t-shirt, doesn't it?
Yeah, for those listening that can't see Peter on video, Durham renowned the world around and the marquee.
It's a giant, it used to be a giant electric sign downtown Durham.
Yeah.
And there is a small building downtown now that I have long longed for. It's got a flat roof, and it's just this weird building right on a corner. And somebody has bought the building and rehabbed it, which they do in Durham. And they put a version of that sign up on the corner, so I get to see it periodically again. And that's kind of nice. I like living in Durham. I like Asheville a lot too. I'm so glad I've gotten to play there. Got to play there twice last year, with once with Tommy Prine, and once with the Connells, both at the Grey Eagle. And great venue, great people, great audiences. A listening audience, very important.
That is true. Well, let's talk a little bit about the culture of North Carolina. And when you moved here, you were 6 years old. Is that correct? Out of Greenwich, Connecticut. So I imagine there was a little bit of a culture shock, at least a little bit. So can you tell us a little bit about?
Maybe more for my parents than for me. My parents were older when they had me. And my dad came down from New York, where he had worked at First National City Bank and got a nice position with Wachovia Bank in Winston-Salem. And my mom came down, and I think she might have been a little resentful having to leave Connecticut and trying to be a social person there with her friends, and having to learn a whole new world in North Carolina. I mean, I remember when she and I first got to Winston-Salem, I think it was probably January 63. We came down in December of 62 and January 1963, and we went to Cook's Warehouse to see a tobacco auction because our hosts in town thought that would be illuminating. Winston-Salem, it's all about the tobacco, Camel City. And so we went, but the thing that I took away from that was that I saw white and colored restrooms, and I'd never seen that before. And I asked my mom what that was, and she didn't seem to know. So that was an eye opener. We were there for the desegregation of the school system. When I was in third grade, my friend's mom would walk up and down protesting in front of our school until her daughter was let into class. Great young woman. And then the schools got desegregated in fifth grade, and I met a lot more friends that I still have today. So that was all an interesting learning process for me to see all that take place. I wonder if I'd seen stuff like that had I stayed in Connecticut. The Connecticut question is one, you're asked about rethinking the dB's. The Connecticut question is one that has come up for me because I left at 6, and I wondered if I would have chosen this path. Would I have done that? Would I have had the experience that I had, the immersive world of the Winston-Salem culture that I got thrown into? I mean, I feel like the people that I grew up with were all smart and fair and interesting and honest. And I seem to be right, because so many of them are still friends of mine and close friends of mine, like Will Rigby from the dB's and Bob Northcott from Little Diesel, and Mitch and Chris and Gene and Ed Bumgardner and Rob Slater, all of these people that I've known for ages. They're all still playing. What? There must have been something in the air. I like to think it was the smell of the tobacco curing that we all smelled in the mornings before we went to school, but I don't know. It was definitely a culture shock, I think. But at 6, it was harder to sort of get a vibe on that, I think. In an overall picture, I was just, I just wanted to play guitar and have a girlfriend, and listen to the Beatles records and figure out who was that band singing Let's Get Lost on a Country Road. Oh, the Kit Kats. Okay. That sort of thing. I just wanted the eye-opening experience. I wanted to become a better listener. I had a big brother, 11 years older, that was a classically trained organist and pianist and chorister. And I got a lot from him. And I had a great band director at school, John Shelton, who was an eye-opener. I had a great choir director at St. Paul's Episcopal Church in Helen, Cornwall. All of these people made music seem like a fantastic thing, an adventure of some sort, a thing that you could get better at if you were good at it. So I thought, well, I don't really think the career as a stock car driver is going to work out. I don't think a minister is going to work out. I cuss too much. Let's rock. And so
Do you detect any of the influences of Southern culture, be it from Winston-Salem, from tobacco or anything like that, or even on a larger sense? Is there any of that you can point to that's found its way into dB's or into Peter Holsapple's music?
It's hard to say something specific from North Carolina. I think when we speak and when we write lyrics in particular, I think we try to sound like we're talking. And I think a lot of that is how we learn to talk in Winston-Salem. We had in that band, because of our shared growing up, and we all were friends growing up, and we all knew each other really well. I mean, I didn't know Gene as well as some of the other guys, but I still knew him pretty well, and so when we finally got a band going, we had this kind of, we're this outpost of Winston-Salem in lower Manhattan, and we talk we communicate a certain way, and we have an unspoken language as well, that or if we bring something up, if we say, Yeah, that sounds like what something Flying Dutchman would say. Everybody would know that we were talking about the WTOB disc jockey, something like that. So I think if there is a North Carolina influence, it's probably more underwritten than it is overt. I think like I say, I don't think I would have been in a band like the dB's had I been in Old Greenwich, Connecticut in my life. I don't know what I would have been in. I would have probably been shunted off to prep school when I was in ninth grade and expected to go to an Ivy League college and become a lawyer, just like all the male folk in my family up until my brother. But my brother inspired me. He was an undergraduate at Carolina for, wow, maybe almost 10 years. It's during the Vietnam War. Smart man. Fifth major, you can stay out of the draft if you can. So
it's kind of a beautiful irony that you moved away from a place where it seems like it would be easier to follow the path that you ultimately were on, but you came to a place like North Carolina where there's the little spot, this little circle of people that you were around in Winston-Salem was the perfect incubator.
I think you had to work harder in Winston-Salem for it. I often wonder, another one of those things, the late in life, back 40 observations. I will often wonder, had I gone to New York right out of high school instead of putzing around at UNC for 3+ years and then leaving, whether it would have been a different kind of thing. I would have been up there in 74. And, that's where things were starting to happen a little bit. But I came when I did. And, I had a great band in college with Mitch and Robert Keeley from Sneakers and Chris Chamis from Secret Service. And we had a great little band and we tried to open some doors. And that was hard in 1977 in Chapel Hill even, But when we left, all of a sudden there were all these bands, it was really great. The X-Teens and Secret Service and I did just a bunch of bands, the Pressure Boys and the Other Mothers and folks like that, and all over North Carolina. So, things happen when they do for a reason, I guess.
Can you tell us a little bit about your songwriting over the years and how it's evolved?
Okay. I guess I started as a Beatles-informed 9-year-old, which would have been, 1965? So you can sort of guess what the songs in 1965 were like. They were very undercooked, and they were lyrically reaching for a love I couldn't possibly have understood at that age. As time has passed, as a twice divorced father of 3, I would say that I still write a fairly Beatles-informed song now and again. But at this point, I feel like, not to cop the Tom Petty analogy, but I do feel like I'm a receiver. And I do feel like the stuff that comes when it's going to come. And I better grab it when it does. And I better have a guitar around and to try to work it out. Or I better be able to get out to the hit shed and see if I can get a track on it. And the fact that the muse has not departed from these shores is really encouraging. And I don't know. I keep thinking, maybe I should do another record. I don't know. I could do another record. I don't feel any huge compunction to. I do feel the compunction to write, and that's good. And the idea would be write until I have something that seems like it might be a record. I think back in the dB's days, the early dB's days, Chris and I were just brimming with songs. They were exploding out of us. And a lot is made of like, oh, well, there's competition between Peter and Chris. Well, it never was really competition. It was really just that we both had a lot of songs and we both really liked each other's songs and everybody liked the songs. And we came up with these great parts and they turned into dB songs. And that's been sort of the deal with the band ever since, you know. I mean, there were the 2 records that we did where Chris was out of the band and it was all my stuff. But, you know, when Chris is, you know, even Falling Off the Sky, the record we did in the, what is it, 2012, I think it came out. Wow, is that 10 years old? Holy cow. Time goes quickly when you're doing the laundry. But, you know, I mean, I write what comes out of me. I write what's at the surface, you know, it just rises like cream, I guess. So I'm writing a bunch of cream songs now. I want to say that I give it a lot of thought and try to construct something out of whole cloth, but I really have to get hit by the muse to do the stuff. I can't sit out here and say, hey, I'm going to write a song about cowboys and it's going to be in key E and it's going to be at 120 BPM. All right, ready, set, record. I mean, I can do that, but you know, it's not going to be very good. One of the techniques that I've used over the years, though, is, and I still do this, I'll turn on the television, I'll grab a guitar, I'll turn the sound off, and I'll just play and just watch and just do that sort of separation of left and right brain. And that seems to work pretty well for me. A lot of times there will be some kind of dislodging of subconscious music in there just from playing like that. No, there's Holsapple songwriting tip number 103.
Very good. Throwing out
Thank
throwing out some pearls. What new music or what music recently is exciting you? What are you listening to?
Well, I realized that I'm probably the only person my age that thought Maneskin was really great on Saturday night. I like a lot of stuff that my 14-year-old daughter turns me on to, like, and we've gotten to see a bunch of these shows. We went to see Billie Eilish. We saw Soccer Mommy, really liked them. We saw Lily, really liked them. You know, we try to go see interesting stuff. We went to a tribute to Art Blakey that was put on at the local Hayti Cultural Center by a former neighbor of ours, and we both really dug that. Local jazz guys. I'm trying to think what all I've been listening to. You know, I listen to a lot of old stuff. I've been listening to the Don and Dewey album, just because they're one of my favorite duos. Talk about great duos. Don Sugarcane Harris and Dewey Terry. They were just ripping out these great tunes. The original version of Leaving It All Up to You, you know, you can walk away from the Donnie and Marie version and you go to the Don and Dewey version and hear where it came from. Just awesome. I'm trying to think, what else have I been listening to? Car radio, you know, I'd still listen to the upper left-hand corner of the dial. We've got three or four really great college stations here. We've got WKNC, Raleigh. We've got WXYC at Chapel Hill. We've got, what's the Durham? The
XDU.
XDU, yeah, I was forgetting the call letters. The station that's Shaw and Central, WNCU, is brilliant all day long and on the weekends. The classical station. So I'm one of those guys that doesn't do a lot of TV. I don't do a lot of satellite. I don't do a lot of podcasts. I still listen to a lot of radio. And I thank WNCW for existing. That's one of the great things I've got going to play in Asheville is getting to tune into the station and enjoy what's going on there. There's always something good on your station.
Well, thanks.
Yeah, thank you on behalf of all your listeners.
Yeah, well, thank you, Peter, for your music. Is there anything that I left out or anything that you would like to add?
No, I don't think there's much that I could add, except that I hope people stay real and stay well and listen to the science, and let's get through all this stuff. And hopefully I can come to a house concert near you soon. That's That's my next step, is to try to book a house concert tour. We tried to do that for March, but people don't want to go in people's houses at this point for a show. I don't blame them. I don't understand, how these variations are peaking and ebbing, but we got to work with what we got. So we're looking for May and June. And so hopefully I'll see you guys then.
How do they book you for a house tour?
There is a person in the Great Northwest who has done house concert tours for people like Steve Wynn from the Dream Syndicate, and I believe Chuck Prophet, maybe. And she has very kindly offered to do a house concert tour for me. And like I say, we were aiming for March and had started trying to get the gigs together for that. And then that wasn't going to work. So we're now looking again. And she's on Facebook, and you can find me on Facebook and drop me a note there if you want to get in touch with her.
Great. Peter Holsapple here on Southern Songs and Stories. It's been a great pleasure speaking with you.
Thanks so much for having me, Joe. I appreciate it a lot. Good questions.
Thank you. All right. We'll talk to you again.